So I am absolutely delighted today. After a couple of reschedulings, we've managed to actually meet up from across the world. So from Mainz, Germany, we have Michael slash Micha slash Freedom. He goes by multiple names. And from the north of England, somewhere near Manchester, we have Shaun Donaghy, the host of the Mindfulness for Beginners podcast. And friends, welcome to the good world. I am so delighted to have you both here.
It's great to be here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
So come on into a place that is fine. I'll be your friend and you can be mine. The world is a stream of constant bullshit, but that doesn't mean there's not a whole lot of good shit. You start with believing you can make something different. Let's build a world that is good. This is a show for adults. I'm delighted to have both of you here. Thank you for taking the time. And I guess a place to start. So yesterday I did an episode, or I guess I recorded it yesterday. When people watch this, it will have been posted. This will go live on Thursday. So it'll be the episode from the previous Monday. But I talked about meditation and mindfulness. And I talked about, I sort of used an analogy of, are you both familiar with the Greek myth of Sisyphus, where he's pushing the boulder up the hill? You don't need to know all the background, but you know the part. He pushes the boulder up the hill, and then it rolls back to the bottom, and he has to start over again. And I was thinking about it, and I sort of realized that that's sort of the experience of meditation, right? As you're sitting there, and you're with your breath, and you're being present, and then, you know, your mind starts to go, oh, what else do I have to do today? And then suddenly you're like, oh, I'm back at the bottom of the hill. I need to start the boulder going up again. So I wanted to, I guess, ask you both whether you think that analogy makes sense or if it's terrible, and we can start there.
I think it's a good analogy. I think the thing that makes me think of from Thich Nhat Hanh is that you have to enjoy your practice. So I think if you see your practice as a method to get to a particular destination, then you might see it as a Sisyphean task, and you might see setbacks along the way. But I think it's one of the really important things is when you're sitting down on the cushion to meditate, is to just enjoy it for what it is, rather than thinking this is going to make me less stressful or this is going to finally make me happy. Is enjoy it for what it is, because it is, you know, there are going to be times in your practice, and I've experienced this, where, you know, during one period you feel like you're really settling into a state or achieving a state that you haven't achieved before, and then you go through a stressful period and you feel like you're going backwards again, and so the boulder rolls down the hill, and you can become frustrated with yourself. I think one of the things that you have to do is to try and let go of a destination and just enjoy the practice for what it is.
Micha, any thoughts?
Yeah, that sounds, Shaun, as if there is no hill you have to push it up, but you push it on a leveled ground, basically, like to enjoy it. There's no big effort to reach the top of the hill, right? But it's more like Thich said, enjoy every step as if you would walk eternally. That you just like push this little rock in front of you, and you enjoy the path, enjoy the journey.
I do also want to make a note for our listeners and viewers. Probably we will refer to Thich, I would guess, a number of times, since I met both of you through Plum Village Monasteries. Thich it means teacher in Vietnam. My pronunciation of Vietnamese is not very good, but it means teacher in Vietnamese. And that's the name that practitioners use to refer to the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who I would recommend that people read any of his many, many, many books.
Yes, yes.
I'm actually curious on that note if either of you have sort of a, and maybe we can even use this to get into something about each of you. How did you find your way to the practice, and sort of what was your entry point into mindfulness in general, and then into the sort of Plum Village practice in particular. And if there's a book that comes up as part of talking about that, you can mention it. If there's not a book that resonates with that, that's also fine. But I would be curious to hear about both of your journeys, because I met both of you when you were already pretty far along.
Mm-hmm.
I think in my case, the kind of triggering event was the death of my father. So it came as he was relatively young. I mean, he was 71. It was something that kind of, and I was in my 20s, and it kind of shook everyone in the family. One of the things we wanted to do was to do a marathon for at Macmillan, which is the charitable organization that looks after people that are experiencing cancer, and they took care of my father whenever he was passing away. So we did it in legs. We weren't. I hadn't done any exercise in 10 years at that point, so I wasn't ready for a marathon. But we kind of got a little bit of fitness together, and we did it in legs. And what I found was that I was getting injuries regularly because I hadn't exercised in 10 years. So I was looking for something to help with that, and yoga was something that came up regularly. So I started with no kind of intention around the wider mental health impacts of yoga. I started practicing it every day to help to deal with the injuries that I experienced. And what I found was I remember very clearly sitting in work, and I'm a person that's always experienced quite a bit of anxiety, and I remember in work just stopping what I was doing and thinking, I feel really calm today. I feel weirdly calm today. I've never felt this calm before, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I made the connection to yoga, and then after yoga, I started looking into what it was about yoga that made you feel calm. And then I kind of got into mindfulness. The first book that I read wasn't a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. It was the 6 week book. I always remember. Is it Paul Thompson? His name always escapes me. But there's a very famous book on Calmer in 6 weeks or something to that effect, uh, which I read was very good. And then a friend said, "Well, if you're into mindfulness, you should come along to the Sangha that I go to. Sangha being a mindfulness group." And so I went along with her, and that was a Plum Village Sangha, and I came out of that. And by the way, this is not the usual experience of going. You won't go along to a Sangha and walk out of it with your life changed, but it kind of was with me. I came out with, and it was just like a light bulb had gone off, and my anxiety had gone from here, not disappeared, but it had gone down to here. Nothing else had made such an effect before, and I came out of that saying, "This is what I've been looking for.
Hmm.
This is what I've been trying to find." And the funny thing is that friend that invited me along, she had never been to it before. She was just looking for a friend to go to the group with.
Oh wow,
So there was a bit of serendipity with it, a bit of luck, but sometimes you need a bit of luck.
that's lovely. Also, I will just note, when we're done and I'm editing, I'll look up the name of the book and I'll post it in the links below so that people can find it. So that we won't have to skip over that. I will also share just something, a story that came up for me while you were talking about, feeling calmer and noticing how unusual that was. Is that last week we had to take one of our dogs to the vet to get his annual vaccines, and we give him a sort of anxiety drug, a mild tranquilizer, trazodone, before he goes, because he gets very stressed out by the vet. And he's a very, very high energy and high anxiety dog. And so for the rest of the day after he got home, it seemed like he was very uncomfortable. And he was like, "Why am I calm? I shouldn't be calm." And he seemed like very, very upset by the fact that he felt calm, because he's so accustomed to being anxious. And I sort of I love picturing you in that situation where you're like, "This is so strange. Why don't I have anxiety?" And almost being anxious about that, but instead being curious about it and sort of following the path to where it took you.
But that's a funny thing about human beings, is that we cling to our suffering. So sometimes human beings feel more comfortable clinging to the situation in which they're suffering rather than trying something new. And this is the difficulty with getting people to practice mindfulness, is for some people it's a step out of the ordinary. And we do cling to our suffering.
Yeah, that's certainly true. The habit energy runs really, really deep. There's sort of a like a devil you know kind of thing there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Micha, could you sort of share your story on how you ended up here?
In a nutshell, for me, it started very early and very late at the same time. But I have a little story. When you talked about being calm and being weirdly calm, I remember the story after my first retreat in Plum Village. I came back to see my hairdresser, and as I was sitting there, and usually we talk, but I was just content, and I was like weirdly calm, and I was sitting there enjoying her washing my head with warm water and working on me with attention and even love, like, because she was my hairdresser for more than 15 years. And at one point, she stood right in front of me and yelled at me, and she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Whoa, I don't know what's wrong with me. You tell me." She said, "You're so calm. I can't stand it." And then I told her the story and where I just came from, and then she understood that I brought the piece of the practice center with me into this chair.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool. Yeah, for me, it started when I look back in hindsight, when I was a little boy and I had a very happy childhood, a lot of freedom. I was worry free. I had a lot of friends, and I was very connected to myself, to my inner voice, to nature, to other people, to animals, like with all, very connected. And I lost this because I was taught, and I taught myself that this is me. You have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, nobody will. This is the others. Take care of the others. Don't trust anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do some elbow stuff. And if you want to move forward, you got to be this and you got to be that. And the world became so serious.
Mm-hmm.
But I still and always remembered, I was on a quest for freedom all my life. And while I had it back then, I lost it, or it faded a bit out of my life, and I was missing it. It was like a magnetic pull. This was me, and I needed to get in touch with this again in my life. But I saw that life was just not made for, it's your childhood and then it's over. But I didn't want to believe that. So I was on a quest for, and I still am on a quest for freedom. My name was Brother Freedom. Now I call myself Freedom, but not because I'm free, because I want to remind myself always to look out for my freedom, to be free, surely, of any habits, perceptions, that I'm here and now alive in every moment, making and being aware that I can make decision that makes me free or happy or tight or anxious, that I'm empowered in each moment with mindfulness practices to step into freedom every moment. Well, and then I tried it in different cultures, subcultures. I was a punk for a while because I liked their freedom, but after a couple of years, I found, not even took me so long, that they were not free. They just like looked free from me from the outside, but once being in there was no real freedom. Then the 90s started, rave, using drugs, dancing. This was the new opening, the new, I don't know, the hippie era of the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
like liberating yourself. And I was digging into there, but after a while I saw like they're just ruining themselves, and nobody is free really here. You get addicted to this and to that and to drugs and to sex and to rock and roll. So I started traveling. I spent 3 months with Rastas in Jamaica. I went to see gurus in India for 3 months, because I thought this is where the wise people live. But then I found out they just live their life in their culture with their problems and limitations, and to me from the outside, again, it looks free, but it's not. Then I tried in relationships, I think like the general curriculum to find happiness,
Mm-hmm.
everything was covered. Um, I came early in touch with my mother, with an esoteric, back then we called it esoteric master, who did Kabbalah and who did work with the pendulum and Reiki and different energy stuff. So that was my first entry into the spiritual world, and I read a lot of Dalai Lama. Buddhism was very interesting to me because it explained all the questions nobody could answer me, but they were still lingering. Then I married, but before I tried to seclude myself, become a Franciscan monk in Croatia. I'm half Croatian, and many of my ancestral stream where there were Franciscans, be it priests, monks, even one archbishop. But I saw quickly that Catholicism is not my thing, and I'm not their thing. Actually, I'm too alive, and I'm too, curious about life and freedom, and this is not what they provide and share in Catholic Church. It's more about service and devotion, which is not bad, but it was just no fit. And then I went back to relationships, and after one particular relationship, which I put so much hope in, and she left me, she broke up with me, I was so broke. I was heartbroken, so heartbroken like never before, and I had to stay home from work. My doctor said, you best rest for 2 weeks, and don't think of anything. And it was then when I walked through the city every day, and that one day I passed a bookshop and looked in the bookshop, and there was this book of Thich, of Thich Nhat Hanh, and it was his face on the cover. And we locked eyes in that moment. These moments when you're not under your control. And then I read the title, but it was as if he would have said it to me, and it was Times of Awareness. And my mind was still, but a voice in me was talking, and it said, this is what you need right now. And I knew this is true. And there was no doubt. So I went in and said, I want this book. And she said, it's the last copy there in the window. I said, great. That's the one I was in touch with. And that was the beginning of meeting Thich Nhat Hanh, or as I used to say, Thich Nhat Hanh meeting me, picking me up from somewhere. Then I read more books. I went to the practice center in France, and I loved it. And these monastic seeds came up again. Why not dedicate your whole life to the quest of freedom and to learn in which areas you are in your own way, and in which area, like the general collective mind is in our way as humankind, preventing us to evolve beautifully with grace and peace and mutual support. And I love the young community. I love the international community. I love the playfulness, and I love this charismatic, wise teacher who held a mirror in form of his books in front of me, and I could read myself and answer my questions. And then I dedicated myself fully. I became a full-time mindfulness practitioner and monk and spent 4 years in France and 10 years in the US, where I met Seth. Right? From then on, you know the story.
I do. The viewers and listeners, and also Shaun, may not know the story. So you're welcome to continue with that last year and a half if you like. Or I can do my version of it, which is going to be less accurate.
No, do it. I'm curious.
Okay.
I'm curious about your perspective.
So, yeah, the first time I met you, I guess, should I maybe backtrack and do my version of this story, since I've asked both of you to share? I might as well also share. So backtracking a little bit, in 2019, I was in therapy one day, and I had seen, such a weird place to start this, but I had seen a meme on Instagram, and it said something like, we need to stop treating anxiety from trauma the same way we treat social anxiety. And I was talking to my therapist, and I said, is the lens for me to understand my childhood, is it that trauma? And she said, well, yeah. I was like, oh, okay. I think I have discussed this with both of you before, and it's certainly come up on this show before, but my maternal grandparents were both Holocaust survivors. Actually, 3 of them, because my biological grandfather died in 1956, long before I was born. My grandma remarried. So her third husband, they were all Holocaust survivors. And so that, just has a way of sort of echoing through generations. And it sort of opened up my world. And I was thinking about, times that I had been mean and hurtful to people, and sort of the rise of feeling, and realized that I was just recreating the same experience that had been passed on to me through my family, passed on to my family through the trauma of, World War II, reenacting World War I trauma and all of that. And so I was in this place where I was very open to discovering new things. So I was out with my wife, Susie, and we were in a bookstore, and we were just getting some books. And we went up to the register, and right by the register, they had, it's sort of the equivalent of at the grocery store when they have candy right by the register. But it's small books. And one of them was How to See from the Mindfulness Essentials series, right? It's like this big. It's maybe 90 pages long, and a page is like a paragraph of text. A lot of those pages are just drawings. And I just saw it, and it was called How to See. And I was like, yeah, I want to learn how to see. That's sort of where I am. And I had already scheduled, I was going to New Mexico for a couple days just to be alone in nature and take sort of a self-spiritual retreat. And so I brought the book with me, and I read it, and suddenly it landed for me in a way that it hadn't previously. And the meditations I had done previously were all, sit and listen to the sound of your breath. And so you end up sort of getting pulled into the person talking instead of actually being present. So that was the start of what drew me into the practice and what drew me to Thai's teachings. And then when Susie and I moved from DC to California, at some point I found out that there was a monastery in California, Deer Park. And it was sort of the height of lockdown, so I wasn't able to go for a while, but then Deer Park reopened, and so I went for a weekend, and Micha, you were one of my 2 orientation sort of teachers, and you had this incredibly joyful energy, and we sort of talked a few times across the weekend. Also, your sister and her family were visiting, so I got to meet them, and that was really lovely. And then a couple years later, I came back on in between, I visited with my father, and we were just there for a Dharma talk, and you were one of the speakers. And I sort of walked up to you at some point, and I said, "Brother, do you remember me?" And I assumed you didn't. And you said, "Well, I would say yes, but then I would have to lie," which was a very you answer. I was like, that's fine. And so we talked for a bit, and it was very nice. And then a couple months later, I went back for a week. In between those first 2 trips was when I had gone to Plum Village in France and met Shaun. But I went back to Deer Park for a week, and you were gone the first couple days, and then like the third day I came outside of my room, and you were standing right outside the room, because I think you were cleaning the room next door, and you looked at me and you said, "Well, there you are." And I said, "Yes, here I am." And we talked some more, and then again your sister and brother-in-law and their family came to visit. Just by pure coincidence, I happened to be there with them a second time. And so that was very nice. And then we talked more and traded contact info. And so my understanding of your journey since then is that you, I think you were missing your family. That seemed to be the main driving force. You can tell me if I'm missing things there, but you decided to move back home to Mainz, and to leave the monastic practice, though not the larger mindfulness practice, after you were there, 15 years? And now you're living in Mainz and teaching, and you officially gave back your robe 2 months ago, something like that. And I realized also in the couple times I've seen you over Zoom since then, both times I've said, "Wow, look at your hair," because your hair was still shaved, but it was like slightly long. And I didn't realize at the time that you were still shaving it. And now you actually have hair. And I fortunately, I know you well enough to know that you are probably not that upset by my having said that multiple times when it was not the correct thing to say. How did I do?
Great, you did great. Just to save my reputation as a manly man,
Yeah.
I didn't go back because I was homesick.
Oh, okay.
And I missed my parents. You know, after 15 years, you get used to weekly Skypes. I love my parents and my family, but it was part of it. So you are partly right. Well, it was again, like I think before, when I stood in front of this bookshop, of the window of the big bookshop, that an inner voice started speaking to me after Thai's passing away.
Mm.
And I had dreams of Thai giving me a package and sending me out and saying, here's your package. In there is what you came with, what you have learned, what I give to you. And now take this package and bring it out to the people. But I couldn't believe it because I felt happy in the community. I had some responsibilities that were very dear to me. I had a good connection to all the brothers. I lived in Southern California. I had a green card. All the conditions were perfect, but this voice would, I don't want to say nagging, although it felt like nagging. It was like pleading, basically, right? Listen to me. You know who I am. And not that I denied it for the longest time. It took me 1.5 years to finally make the decision and share with the brothers. But I wanted to be sure that I don't regret a decision, that I can live with the consequences, leaving this fantastic, beautiful, warm community of mindfulness practitioners and going back into an unknown future. And it was only on a hike there at Deer Park where my inner voice again started speaking to me and said, I know what you're going to hear, what you need to hear. And I said, oh, that's interesting. Because I don't know. So please, you tell me. I'm telling myself, right? Basically in a self-dialogue. So would you be so kind and please tell me then what I need to hear? So because I'm making the decisions here. And then it says, you don't want to regret it. And I said, gee, yes, I don't want to regret this decision.
Yeah.
And then it said, I can tell you, you won't. You won't regret it. I can promise you what is coming, or is it all going to be golden? But you have to do this and you won't regret it. And this is true. Now 1 year back home, I had good times, I had bad times, but there was not a single day when I regret it. I'm still in touch with many of the brothers and sisters. So yeah, the harmony and the connection is still there, but I know I had to do this step to evolve, basically. So this was the main reason. And then, of course, the mind brings in, my parents get older. I have the green card now. If I continue to stay in the US, I don't want to get a phone call in the middle of the night and have to return. Don't want to return on a home visit and my parents don't know who I am. All these things. My nieces are now in their 20s and they're growing up studying, and I want to hang out. And, I've been away for 14 years, so I think it was just time.
Yeah.
Time and conditions were favorable for me to continue my journey in another form. And you said, I didn't lose any of the essence of the love that Thai has sown into my heart. This will stay probably forever.
I would also add probably the essence of love that you have sown into your heart through your own practice, right? His teaching certainly helped, but also you did a lot of work to cultivate that comes through.
Right. You have to do the work.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Please like and subscribe. 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 Yes, friends, that is your reminder. If you are enjoying what you're watching or listening to, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to this channel. Please share it with your friends. We're trying to grow this out, trying to do a thing. And I appreciate all the help that I can get. And once again, friends, in this case, you two friends, Shaun and Michael, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. So there is something that it came up somewhere in both of those conversations. I think it was Michael, when you were talking about the punk scene, right? And the way that we can seek freedom and see a group that appears to be nonconformist, and then once you get into the group, you find yourself conforming in just a different way. And that is something that I've been sort of working through myself and trying to figure out, how do I remain authentic to myself? That's part of why my opening theme song has a pretty mild swear word in it, but a swear word nonetheless. And I think there's something with sort of the status of groups and particularly spiritual groups. So I think you both know this, but I'm in seminary to become an interfaith minister. And so I will find out, actually, by the time this is on by the time this episode is posted, I will know whether I've been approved. But I find out next week in our real time. It should knock on all the wood. I'm feeling pretty optimistic. But I think there is a difficulty in entering into a leadership role with not getting too into your own stuff, right? And sort of having to balance the need to help people find themselves versus the maybe temptation or just structural incentive to sort of get people to conform themselves into whatever your community is. And so I'm curious for both of you if you have thoughts on sort of how to. The way I've been thinking about it is it's not a cult of personality, it's a cult of individual liberation or something like that, right? It's we're just trying to help people find themselves. We're not trying to turn people into something. But I'm curious for both of you how you have struck that balance in your own journey, and then also in your interactions with the people who you teach and who view you as a leader and sort of a symbol of whatever they view you as a symbol of.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't found that particularly difficult because I guess in kind of the Plum Village Sangha tradition, the person who is leading the Sangha through an evening is a facilitator rather than a leader. And the thing that I've found is that the people, especially whenever I was starting off in the practice, the people that I looked up to as being leaders didn't really want to be seen as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
The idea was that Sangha was somewhere you could go where you could learn from everybody. So even though I was very new, that they kind of saw themselves as being able to learn from me. I mean, really, what was happening was I was learning from them because I didn't know, anything about the practice. Um, and I have learned a lot from Ty's books, from Thich Nhat Hanh's books. Um, but I would say I've learned more from the people that I've practiced with. So I think it's really important to set yourself up as a facilitator of learning rather than a teacher or a leader. And I run a sangha in work, and I've asked kind of a few times for people to volunteer to step forward to lead it, especially because, some weeks I'm just not around. I'm over in Ireland visiting my family or whatever. Uh, and people are reluctant to step into that role. And what I do whenever I'm running the Sangha at work is I have, 52 weeks of topics within mindfulness and then do a guided meditation. So it's a half-hour session in work. And one of the weeks, and it was a recent week, was sharing the practice with other people. Uh, and I think it's really important that, there obviously are leaders within the Buddhist and mindfulness movement, but there's I think there's something on everyone talking about their own experience
Mm-hmm.
in practicing mindfulness, and sharing that. And sometimes it's easy and you really enjoy it, and sometimes it's a bit more difficult. Um, and what I try to get across to people is it's really important for you to talk about your experience in practicing mindfulness and meditating, because if we're talking about the 1,000-year project that Ty was talking about, and this being the seed being planted with everyone and cultivating that in everyone, then it needs people to share the practice with other people. So I very deliberately don't uh, put myself across as a leader. I am in a senior position in work, uh, and in that respect, I am a leader. But in terms of sharing the practice, I don't put myself across as any kind of a Zen master, because I definitely am not any kind of a Zen master. I think my Irish nature is very, very difficult to line up with being a Zen master. So and one person asked me once, because I was talking about, this was quite early on when I was running the Sangha in work. I was kind of talking about the books, and I was kind of, I had one of the books with me. It was Happiness by Thich Nhat Hanh, And I was saying, that there's lots of great practice that you can learn from these books. And someone asked me, so have you mastered all of the practices in the book? And I didn't want to laugh because I didn't want to make the question seem silly. But I think the idea in my head of me kind of mastering the practices that did seem kind of silly to me, because uh, to me the practice is a path, and it's something that you walk, and it's something that you enjoy. And I don't think that you have to be that experienced in the practice to share it with other people. Now, you obviously have to be slightly careful not to misrepresent the practice, but I don't think that you can go that far wrong just talking about your own experience and what you've gained from it, especially what you've gained from it. I mean, for me, the practice has been the what I've always been searching for. I was always looking for a pill, or I was always looking for a therapy that would get rid of my anxiety. Of course, you can't get rid of your anxiety, but I was looking for something to deal with it. And mindfulness is the only thing that's done that, and that's why I have this pathological need to share it with other people. Because if there is someone that's suffering, if there is someone that's struggling with their anxiety or with anger or with sadness, then I want to be able to share it with them. So it's it's a difficult one, because I feel this need to push the practice out there, and I know that I can share it with people and communicate it with people, but I feel very reluctant in seeing myself as a leader in that respect,
Hmm.
because I look at my own practice, and I look at my own imperfect practice, and I look at my own imperfect behaviors, my own imperfect life, and a little voice says, well, who are you? Who are you to kind of share Buddhism and mindfulness with other people? Uh, and it's a difficult thing to get over, but I do get over that voice, because what I want ultimately is for everyone to have access to it, and for everybody to have given it a chance to transform their lives, because it does transform your life.
Well put.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I have this idea of my, so one of the things, minister is sort of the term that I've been using lately, but we actually get to choose our own titles. And so partially I've been thinking of, I'm an interfaith student teacher, and sort of everything I am in life is I'm a student teacher, student first. But there are some things I know, and I can teach other people a little bit about the things I know, but also I'm learning all the time. And it's important to have that idea of all of us are learning first, in my perspective. Um, yeah, Michael, do you have any further thoughts on this? Just to
Yeah,
give you a
I
chance.
mean, giving names is not helpful. Being this or being that, we really have to, what Shaun said, like look into ourselves and our experience as a human being. And so titles can be a nice book cover, but they never convey the content of the book,
Hmm.
right? There is a saying by Krishnamurti, and he said, teach the child the name of the bird, and the child will never see that bird again.
Hmm.
Mm.
Because it only remembers the name of the bird, but
Yeah.
not like the awe and the curiosity, how it maybe took off or landed in the water. It was all taken from the kid by giving the bird a name. And I agree what Shaun said. Like I want to ask a Zen question. What is the difference between a master and a student? It is that the master has failed more times than the student had ever tried.
Hmm.
This is the only difference. So the student can quickly turn into a master just simply by failing all the time and by pushing that rock on top of the hill again, just to let it roll down and begin anew. And yeah, I also figured even you teach and you give a lecture to others, and others are listening and like, yeah, wanting to soak in your wisdom. For me, it was more a free private psychotherapy hour
Mm-hmm.
where I was on the podium and showed myself vulnerable with the insights that I had received with the help of the practice, because I always brought stories from my parents, from my childhood, from my life, because I always connected them with the practice. And I said, oh, wow, okay, this is how the mind works. Oh, this is how my mind works. This is why we do this as a human race. So I was fusing my personal experiences with what I found very practical insights from the teachings, the Dharma, the practice. And so I cannot, and then it was then when I found actually that I don't have to find anything, you know. I'm not a $10 note, a missing $10 note in the pocket of an old winter coat that I have to find again.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is here and now. This is the message. Everything is already here. I have more than enough conditions right now to be happy and at peace and content. So all I need to do is have to maybe recognize this or remember. Maybe this is what you meant by finding ourselves. We don't want to turn people into other people. We want to rediscover. We want to discover. We want to come home, right? And the present moment is the gate to that insight. And then it is, to me, to really internalize it and to embody it with a practice. To internalize means to accept this, your golden nature, basically. You know, you're being a present human being. Human being, not doing, not a human doing, but a human being. To internalize this, aha, this is what I am. I don't need to find myself. I'm not lost. I'm right here. And then to embody it with the help of the practice by practicing eating meditation, walking meditation, mindful breathing, by being aware, looking deeply into stuff, being there for myself, enlarging my heart, creating a space where I can actually listen also to my suffering and my joy and have enough capacity to be there for them and to look at them without being terrified or having to push it away or wanting to last forever. I can just observe it in a wider space and then the expression of it, you know, to go and, if you wish, teach it. But there's a nice quote. You see, I'm a quote person from St. Francis. He said, go and preach the Gospels wherever you go. And if necessary, use words.
Mm.
Yeah, and I translated that into the practice. And I said, go and teach the Dharma, the practice wherever you go. And if necessary, use words. And I have a nice story for this one. We were in New York City, a couple of months for an event, and we were walking down Union Square, down the Fifth Avenue. Broadway is that. And at one point, a man was shouting us from the other side of the street, and he said, like, you're students of Thich Nhat Hanh. We first like, what? Well, okay, in New York City, everything can happen in that city.
Mm-hmm.
And then we shouted back and he said, how do you know? Yes, we said, how do you know? And he said, I see it the way you walk.
Mm.
And that was a compliment. This was like filling our hearts with warmth that this man knew whose students we were by the way we were walking. So you don't need words to be a teacher, if you want to call it a teacher, and take away that experience from the child watching a bird, right?
I think that's really important. I think it's really important to show people, share the practice with people through your own practice more than anything else. And for me, one of the most important ways to do that is in work. I mean, work is a place where people in senior jobs feel justified and they're stressed out and they're not happy about something, so they shout at people, or meetings where everyone is kind of talking over each other. And I think that it's really important to set an example or show an example to people that this is something that you can integrate into your life. And mindfulness moved from being something that was in a book and something that you went to once a week to being something transformative whenever I started integrating it into my life. And the thing that's great about that is that then you are a teacher every minute of every day that you're around other people, because they can see. And just to pick an example, there was a period last year where there was a vacancy, and I manage a team of analysts, in the Department of Health, and there was another team that didn't have a deputy director, and they needed somebody to cover that. So I was doing two jobs at the same time, and I was quite enjoying it. I was really enjoying it, and people were like, "Oh, Shaun, you must be going through hell. It must be terrible." And it's not, because it was just like one decision after another, one moment after another, and enjoying it, and I did enjoy it, and people could see what the practice, because I'm open about the fact that I practice mindfulness. People can see the calmness, the patience, the persistence that the practice gives me and allows me to apply to the work that I do. And then that gets people curious about the practice and wanting to learn about it. So then they come along to Friday Mindfulness, and that's how it grows. That's how, the practice grows out, is walking a walk, just as Michael say, is you're walking a walk in front of people, and people can see that you're walking a walk. So you don't have to tell them, you don't have to beat them over the head and say you should be practicing mindfulness, because they can see it in you and they want that for themselves.
That's it. When you embody and express it, and it irradiates peace and calm and clarity and solidity and all these qualities people are looking for these days, then they want this. They say, "What are you doing? I want to do the same." And then they are ready to invest their time and their energy, saying, "Okay, maybe I have to prioritize now some things different. Maybe I have to let go of some habits, but it's worth it." That was one reason why I went to the monastery. I said, like, I know I have to take vows. There's no sex, no drugs, no rock and roll anymore. You live in a community, but I'm happy to pay that price because I know I have suffered for less, you know. And here's a chance for me to awaken, to recognize myself, understand my mind, enlarging my heart and compassion, and learning to look deeply, how to see, right? And this was all worth it without a minute of doubt. Yeah. You see, Shaun said we can be our own teacher. You're a teacher, of course, but you're a teacher for yourself. And then even to make it not personal, but maybe conditional, I'm saying in my courses that your greatest teacher is your breath. This is what mindfulness is all about. Like, you're observing your breath, right? And your breath is your biggest teacher from the beginning to the end of your life, from the very beginning to the very end of your life. And if you learn to listen deeply to your breath, you learn a lot about yourself. Because with the years, you hear your breath talking to you.
That's so important, because the number of times that I've gained insight into what I thought was an intractable problem that there wasn't a solution to, where, okay, I'm just going to put that to one side. I'm going to go and I'm going to sit in the cushion, and suddenly that ocean of calmness, that ocean of strength, and that ocean of wisdom that you can tap into when you can still your mind and body enough, and suddenly an answer surfaces. I used to keep a pen and paper next to the cushion, because there were so many times where something came up and I didn't want to be swept away by it and led away by it. But I didn't want to lose that insight, because I've got quite a poor memory. So I used to keep a pen and paper there, because the number of insights that you can get from the practice, and this is what I say to people: yes, the practice is beneficial, uh, from calming the mind and the body down, but there's exponentially larger benefits from the insight that you can gain into your own life from settling your mind and calming your body and bringing the two back together again.
Mm-hmm. I'll show you something. Give me a sec, which I call a Dharma tool, and I want to play it with you. Look at this. You know what that is? A snowball, right?
Yeah.
So now, as soon as you can read something, read it to me.
If
Go ahead.
you can read this,
Yeah.
your mind is calm. There it is. Oh, I love that.
Yes. So this is our mind usually,
Yeah.
right? And it needs to settle, as you say, Shaun. And then you have clarity, you have insight from that space of decelerating, from calming down body and mind, and they can actually relax and make space. And this is not something you have in your hands. All you have to do is prepare the conditions for the mind to go deep, to have no worries, to have no tension, no fear, no anxiety, and believe in yourself and say, this is my home right here, right now. And I trust myself and I feel safe here and I make myself comfortable. And then this transformation happens. This insight comes to you because it doesn't come to you because it's already there. You just see it, right?
Hmm.
I have this on the other side in German, so I'm bilingual.
I'll have to get one in Irish.
Yeah, of course. You get this at this big rainforest dealer on the internet, and then you just put papers in it.
Mm.
Okay.
It's like these photo snowballs where you can put the photo of your loved one inside, or Dharma tools. Up to you.
That's very clever. I like that. I'm trying to start off 2025 by buying fewer things on the internet, so I may give myself a bit of a break before I do that, but that will go on
When's
my
your
list.
birthday? Maybe we do it for you.
Yeah. Um, also, just coming back a moment to Shaun's comment about the keeping a notepad. I it's interesting to hear you say that, and I feel like maybe you've even mentioned that to me before. But I often find myself wishing that I had a notepad, and I rarely seem to remember. Well, I never seem to remember to actually put it next to the cushion, so it's never there when I want it. But I think also part of me thought, no, I'm not supposed to do that. That's not supposed to be part of the practice. And just last night, I was reading. I've been rereading in bits and pieces the whole mindfulness essentials. So I've gone back to the beginning. I'm on How to Sit, which is the first volume out of the 12th book is coming out later this year because there's still more. And one of the things that Ty suggests in it is to put a little notebook next to your cushion. And it was just really, I think it was eye opening for me that I don't have to, again, I don't have to constrain myself in a certain way in order to sit on the cushion. I don't have to be a certain type of person on the cushion. I just have to be myself on the cushion. And I really
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Can I share what comes up most often actually in those insights? Is a lot of the time I'll sit down on a cushion and I'll be annoyed at somebody. That person is annoying me. Why is that person annoying me?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll sit down on a cushion and then I'll sit there and I'll focus on my breath and I'll realize that it might be that I was looking at the situation and I was looking through a warped lens. Uh, but a lot of the time, I'll suddenly understand or see what's going on with them, the suffering that was behind the choices that they made. And the thing that is, I think, is really powerful, as well as the insight that it gives you from calming your body and your mind is the compassion that it gives you as well. And one of the things that worries me about the modern world, I try not to worry about things, but one of the things that worries me about the modern world, where we're kind of bombarded through social media with things that are the algorithm wants us to get angry about or get anxious about, is that uh, I worry that we're starting to lose our compassion for other people. I worry that the pace that we live in, the hours that we work, the news that we get bombarded with means that we're in a stressed state, and then we can't empathize with people who are different to ourselves. And I feel like I see this, especially in a political sphere across the world. And what I find, because I'm somebody who has I've got the seeds of anger in me, the same as anyone else. But the thing that I find is that uh, those uh, seeds of anger are less strong when I take the time to sit down and focus on my breath. because I get a compassionate insight into what's driving their behavior, and actually sometimes I see that behavior in myself as well. So it's such an important part of the practice for me, is being able to gain insight into into my own anger. And we talked about books earlier on, and I think I've read most of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, but the one that stuck with me more than anything else was anger, because I was such an angry young person. I was angry all the time, and the thing I'm so grateful for in the practice is having the opportunity to gain that insight, to become more compassionate towards other people. And anyone who's listening to this who struggles with their anger, I would recommend Anger by Thich Nhat Hanh. It is such an incredible, transformative book.
Thank you. That's one I haven't read, and I have thought about it. My own journey with anger has been that I spent most of my life trying to stifle my anger because I was very afraid in sort of my childhood. Anger looked very explosive. And so I just did everything to stuff those feelings down. And then, of course, eventually there's nowhere to stuff them and they just overflow. And the practice has absolutely helped me with that and helped me find compassion for myself and for others, and sort of navigate my anger. I do want to quickly ask, just time-wise, how are you both feeling? Because it's late for both of you and you have other things to do. Do you want to keep going for a bit?
I'm happy to. I'm quite enjoying it, actually.
Okay.
I'm happy to keep going for a
Great.
bit.
I love that for me. So so that's great. I'm having a wonderful time just honestly sitting here listening to both of you share things. And I'm remembering how much I can learn from listening to friends. So it's pretty great. There was something else that I wanted to raise. Oh, so Shaun, you mentioned social media, and this is something that I sort of brought up as a possible topic for us. I have a really hard time with social media for exactly the reason you're talking about, right? I go on there, and maybe the first couple things I see are sort of lighthearted and funny, or sometimes they're poignant, but very, very quickly I'll see something that just, either angers me or at the very least deeply frustrates me, right? It's something, and it's usually something political. Although sometimes it's like sports and the conversations people have about sports still manage to set me off. It's sort of anytime someone is being very dismissive, I find that tends to elevate my stress levels. But I'm curious, Michael, you are at least somewhat active on social media, right? I see your posts and comments and things. Shaun, I know you, I think, use it less, but you're on at least Reddit sometimes, I know, although maybe you've been doing it less.
So I made a New Year's resolution and I gave up Reddit.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I haven't regretted it once.
Yeah.
So I do quite enjoy Reddit, because if you want to see funny cat memes or just funny stuff on it's really entertaining. But the problem with it is, just as you were saying, Seth, is that you will also see kind of not very kind political posts or something cross-posted from Twitter. And the thing that I realized was that quite a lot of the time, after I was on Reddit for a while, I was quite angry. And it was the one kind of social media that I was using. So I decided to give it up. And I have to say, it's been pretty damn good for my mental health.
Yeah. Every time I give up, I say this because it's happened multiple times. Every time I give up Reddit or Instagram or Facebook, I'm on less than the other two. But anytime I give up any social media platform for any stretch of time, I feel great. And then for whatever reason, I go back on it and it's just right. I mean, I guess it's the boulder back down to the bottom of the hill. Michael, I'm curious to hear how you engage with social media, and sort of what, do you have a particular process or practice or approach to it?
Yeah, as you said, like I use social media to post my insights, to post some of my teachings, doing little reels and bringing my message out,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not the type who is scrolling through like any one of them like endlessly because of that reason. Like I want to really pay attention to what I'm paying attention to. So I'm rather detached and apolitical because, as I said, like I feel myself as a human being, and in my eyes, politicians, I don't want to be offensive, but are the least wise and compassionate and peaceful people
Yeah.
of all professions. Every painter, every musician, be it a punk rock band, or they are more compassionate and human-like
Hmm.
because they act much more from the heart than from the mind, making logical consequences and decisions, and being so childish, at the same time, and wanting to hit back if they have been hit, or if you take away my toy, I will take away your toy, and just looking at it from a higher perspective makes it unattractive to me. So I often clash with my friends because I'm apolitical. I say like, but I can tell you what I think of him saying that. What hint does it give to me?
Hmm.
Because we're all talking about parts of us. And if I'm attracted to a certain bad news, it's not the news is just the carrier, or the happening, the event is just the carrier, but it triggers a seed. We were talking about qualities in us. A seed in the garden of my consciousness is my heart that I haven't transformed yet, like anger, anxiety, fear. They are deep, deep seeds in us, like they kept us alive, and they helped us surviving. And that's why we are so drawn to fear and to watch thrillers and like movies that actually scare us,
Hmm.
because we want to learn how to survive. And it's so hard for us to let go of the notion that we don't live in caves anymore. But it is so implanted. Of course, you have to take care when you go out there in the world today, but we are relatively safe and we are not able to be more equanimous. I wouldn't say I'm indifferent to the events happening, and there are, I know, beautiful and terrible events happening, but I'm equanimous and I see what part in me is I have to deal with, what part is showing up when I'm reading this, when I'm listening to this, when I'm letting in a big suffering of a whole nation, of a group, of one person. And why does it speak to me so? And then I listen to my breath again. I come back to the here and now, and this wide space that will open up, me calming down, my mind calming down, returning to my breath and reading and listening to my breath will tell me, this is the part in you when you were a child, or because you have ever heard, or you have experienced so many situations in your life where exactly this happened and you never were able to face it. So it became a shadow. It became the demon Thich Nhat Hanh often speaks of in the basement, which we shall call out every day when we have developed a little bit space in our hearts in a meditative state of mind, and invite our demons from the basement to sit next to our couch and listen to their suffering.
Hmm.
And then we'll find out that we're not victims of that demons, but the demons are victims of our incompassionate, of our, not having the capacity to embrace them and to see ourselves as we truly are, but as that what we want ourselves to be or to see. And then we see that it doesn't take much to transform suffering like sadness, depression, anxiety, fear, anger, if we can really see it as a part of us.
Mm.
And news are basically the perfect mean to train yourself in mindfulness. Yeah, the worse the news, the better the practice. And there is a Zen saying too, talking about quotes. It says, "Bitter mind, sweet practice."
Hmm.
Yeah,
Mm.
it gives you food.
That's so important what Michael just said, because the thing that changed everything for me was Thich Nhat Hanh saying, "There you are, my old friend," whenever he was talking about sadness or anger or anxiety. Because for me, whenever I was younger, anxiety was the enemy. So how do I put this in a box? How do I beat this down? How do I shut it out? And what changed everything for me was welcoming in my anxiety and holding my anxiety and understanding that my anxiety is actually trying to protect me. It's trying to help me. It might not be pleasant, the experience of feeling it, but uh, the anxiety is there to try and protect me, and actually visualizing what that person looks like, that anxiety person, who for some reason he turned out to look like a journalist that works, and I won't name which one it is, but for some reason it turned out to be a journalist that works in the UK. And so whenever I'm feeling anxious, I can say, "There you are, my old friend."
Mm.
And I'm sitting on a park bench with my old friend anxiety, and I can talk to him and chat to him. And do you know what the strange thing is? Is that I've become comfortable to the point with anxiety. I've become comfortable to the point with it where I can have a conversation with him about what's happening. And actually, I smile to my anxiety, and my anxiety actually smiles back to me now. And that's, we're always going to experience anxiety. It's always going to be there, but it's our reaction to it and how we choose to deal with it and process it that decides whether we suffer or not.
Mm.
That was Ty's most intimate personal practice he was sharing with us when he addressed his suffering, talking to it in a self dialogue where people usually would say, okay, if it's a Zen master doing this, then it's okay, but I will never talk to myself like this. That's, like childish, this is naive, and it's ridiculous, basically. What will people think about me? So I really appreciate you saying this, and looking back into my own practice when I feel like sadness or sadness about myself, disappointment. I feel I'm not a whole person. I have moments where I think I need to heal myself. How can I heal others? And then I allow this seed, this, demon, this shadow from being locked away to be a part of myself, to be me. And this is why I said victim or not victim, because I realized that this demon just wanted to be seen
Mm.
and to be recognized,
Yeah,
what we talked at the beginning, as a part of me, which I deny its existence, although it is there. And I'm suffering because I'm locking it out. And often I don't even need to talk because my attention comes automatically inwards and I'm listening to my breath. And I'm just allowing this feeling to live in every cell of me. And I feel into this sadness. I know, I can change that every moment. I can do the dishes, turn on the TV, leave the house. But I decide to give it a space in this heart space. And then I cry because it's so touching. And you've been vulnerable, so I want to be vulnerable too. Man cry in meditation, and it's a beautiful crying. It's not a lost, traumatic, pathetic crying. It's like crying the tears of self-compassion, of seeing yourself, of
Mm.
recognizing a little part more than you allowed yourself, and this part is so beautiful that it makes you cry.
that was one of the things that I enjoyed about Plum Village, because at a couple of the Dharma talks, the ones that really touched me, you know, the waterworks start going, and I'm just crying my eyes out. But it doesn't. That's the thing. I felt very comfortable doing that at Plum Village, and not trying to hide it,
Mhm.
and being quite open about it, because in Irish culture, you know, it's not hugely comfortable with men crying, and I think it's a lot of cultures around the world are the same, and that makes me feel really sad because I think a lot of the problems that men have stem from the fact that they can't openly express the emotions that they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and whenever I'm talking about a topic within mindfulness to the Sangha work, like I talk about my own experience of feeling anxiety and feeling ashamed for feeling anxiety and feeling inadequate for feeling anxiety. And whenever I'm in work, despite being in a senior job, I tell people, I have that imposter syndrome. I feel anxiety that I'm not good enough. And it makes them feel okay with being able to share that themselves, because what I don't want is to have the experience I had whenever I was younger, of working with senior people who kind of put themselves across as terminators, who were not affected by anything, when that's clearly not the truth. Like, all human beings are suffering, everyone is suffering. And so I want people to be able to see that, yes, I'm teaching mindfulness, and yes, I'm kind of in this job and work, but I'm suffering, and it's okay for you to say that you're suffering as well. And one of the things, if I could wave a magic wand, I really wish that we could make it okay for men in any culture to be able to express what they're feeling, because we lose too many men that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that is beautifully put and very accurate. I will also share, I have a really hard time crying. It happens very occasionally, but I have a very, very deep habit, energy, learned behavior of like, no, we're not going to do that. Crying is, and intellectually, I have moved well past that, right? And intellectually, I'm like, I really would like to cry. It would be nice to have that release. I remember at some point I was talking to someone about my grandpa. Where do I have? Oh, here he is. There's a picture of me and my grandpa. It's probably kind of hard to see from there, but he died when I was 9, I think. But I was telling a story about him, a really, really horrible story about one of his experiences during the Holocaust, and I was telling my wife Susie about it, and I started bawling, and then after maybe 2 seconds, it just shut off. And she was like, "It's okay, you can cry with me." And I was like, "I know, but I physically, like, I don't even know what happened. It just turns off." And it's something I'm working on, and it has slowly been getting better, but it is that tendency to shut everything down. And Shaun, you made the point of it's not just sadness, it's not just anxiety, any those kinds of things. All feelings, pretty much, we're sort of taught that's weakness. Showing any kind of feeling is weakness. Showing any kind of emotion is weakness, but somehow we've also labeled anger as not an emotion, and so it's okay to show anger. And to your point about people suffering, there's something that it took me a while to realize is that when people are angriest and screaming and sort of being that terminator that you were talking about, is often the time that people are suffering the most. Right?
Yeah.
I certainly know it from my experience, and from the times I have been the most furious. It's like, I am hurt, I am afraid, and so I'm just like, this is my defense mechanism, is I'm going to hurt other people worse so they stop trying to hurt me, which is not a very healthy thing to do in relationships. I learned and have moved past. I don't do that in relationships anymore, but or in my marriage. But when I was younger in relationships, I did that. If I felt just a little bit hurt or a little bit threatened, and the same part of my brain that was good at doing improv comedy, where I could think of a joke really fast, was also very good at thinking of the meanest possible thing I could say to the people I cared about the most in the moment, and no filter, it would just come out, and then I couldn't take it back, and I had just hurt someone. And so I think there's also this component of being able to sit with and hold and care for our emotions enables us to be so much better with each other. Also, just to connect it to something Michael said, you were talking about sitting with the question of, you want to heal yourself, you want to heal others. And I don't think you were doing this, but often that's presented as either or, right? You either have to take care of yourself or you have to take care of other people. And to take care of other people means sacrificing yourself. And what I have learned is that actually we need to be able to do both. And it only works if we're all taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves, and all like working together towards this process of healing.
Yeah. Try thinking of an ingenious idea or an ingenious, funny thought you had, and smile to yourself, like, because you find it so funny.
Mm-hmm.
You will always smile to me too. Smile is not a one-way direction. When you smile inwardly and you smile outwardly. And the same is true. The same is true with what you just said. You cannot go only one direction. If you take care of yourself, you're automatically smiling towards, others. You automatically care for others.
Yeah.
But the same is true with the other side. If somebody from the outside touches you, he's speaking to a part in you, to a seed being watered in your consciousness and your heart, and it affects you back too. So it's an eternal flow. It's an eternal dance of energies being shared and being tapped on and being recognized and acknowledged and watered, and that's what they want. As I said, these parts of sadness, of anxiety, of anger, whatever it is, it's not a sign of weak emotion or a lack of emotional intelligence if you cry, but you have an insight. You're sitting with something that has been long separated from you, and now you are together in one space, and there's something happening. It's fermenting, and the side product of this fermentation, of this transformation, which is crying, actually, is transformation in action without you doing anything. And this cocktail of hormones, rushing through your body, they cause water coming out of your eyes. As I said, you don't have to pathetically cry, but it's just like a compassionate witnessing of a fermentation happening in your body. And when we cry, we men, because somebody's knocking our nose, and tears coming out, it's not a shame, huh? Or if we ride the bicycle in a cold wind and we're crying, or chopping onions, is that manly? What's different from that crying and that crying? And the beauty of crying with your, let's call it lost emotions, or denied or dispatched emotions, integrating them back into your consciousness, into your awareness. If it's so touching, it's like you're witnessing something very beautiful. And it might be, intimate, so you don't have to do it on a TV show, but you can. And I also believe, like, it is time for us, we live in the 21st century, for man to become human.
But I can really relate to what you're saying, Seth, because whenever I was a kid, I used to cry more than the other boys, and I had a couple of people sit me down and say, "Look, boys don't cry. You don't do that." So then, whenever I was a teenager, because if I was feeling sad, I would just cry. I would just cry openly, and I felt ashamed of it because people thought I should feel ashamed of it. And so what I did was I found a way to find a big cork, and I put a big cork in that dam so that nothing came out of it, and that basically I carried that into my adulthood, and so I couldn't cry for a long time, and so it took uh, unprogramming that, and trying to encourage myself to do it, give myself permission to do it, give myself permission to cry in front of other people, and it will come. I can tell you that it will come. The thing is that, like pulling a cork out of a dam, there might be a lot of water that comes at the start, so it might be a little bit more than you expect at the start, but it will come. If you give yourself that permission to be vulnerable in front of other people, then it's and it is the 21st century, as Michael said. It's the 21st century, and I think most people are understanding of and supportive of men being vulnerable in front of other people. I just think that I wish that it was universally true, because it's unfortunately it isn't always true.
Yeah, I think I have managed to put myself in social groups where it's as you say, it's generally accepted and fine and even encouraged. But there are a lot of social groups that I am not a part of where that's not as much the case. And I think also, to your point about being told, boys don't cry, I think a lot of the anger that we see among men, certainly in the US and in many parts of Europe and probably around the world right now, comes from having spent so long being told, you are supposed to be this, you are supposed to be this, you're not supposed to be that, you're supposed to be this. And we do those things, coming back a lot earlier to what Michael was saying before he joined the monastery. Like, we're like, okay, a marriage, if I get married, I'll be the thing I'm supposed to be and I'll feel completed. If I get a promotion at work, I'll be the thing I'm supposed to be and I'll feel completed. And we keep chasing this thing that is never actually going to happen unless we just stop and accept ourselves. And it's really, really hard to sit with the idea that the entire world has been lying to you for, in my case, 42 years, or the entire culture. In a lot of people's cases, your parents have been lying to you, not even intentionally, but just there's this big lie, and confronting that is really hard. And it's much easier to just not face it and end up getting really angry. And so I think all of this kind of fits together for me, right? It's sitting with our emotions. It's sitting with these narratives that we've been, something I talked about in my last episode, the Boulder episode, is that mindfulness helps us sort of examine our stories and examine our narratives, right? And you can pick up one narrative and say, oh, this one says men are supposed to be dominant and, coerce other people to doing what they want. Actually, I don't need that narrative. I can set that narrative aside. This other narrative says, the example I used yesterday is like, don't swim with alligators. They're dangerous. That's a good narrative. Let's keep that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But if you don't do that work of trying to understand the narratives that you've received, you're just accepting all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is worth re-examining them, and it is worth seeing where the roots of them come from.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one thing around the kind of boys don't cry thing, one of the, I read an interesting theory. It was by a feminist who kind of put forward the theory that the reason why we view men in that way is because of war.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't send someone to war who you know will be terrified and will be suffering. But if you think of that person as somebody who is stoic and just goes and gets a job done and they're not bothered by it, then you kind of can send men to war, and we've carried that legacy through. Like, we obviously still have wars, but in the kind of comfortable, safe Western countries that we live in, we don't have like major wars that you send off all your young men to. But we used to have wars like that, and that's where this idea comes from. Is that the idea of the disposable male,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't treat someone as disposable if you see them as a real human being who's suffering. And that's the thing that we've got to work through. We've got to see the roots of where this stuff comes from.
Yeah, that point really, really lands for me. Thank you for putting that out there. I think one of the things that really, it drew me into my career in politics, and then when I got fed up with politics, it took me into my career, or whatever this journey is that I'm on now, the spiritual journey. The idea of just how many people are treated as being disposable in our society and culture, and the way that our economic system is set up based on the premise that certain people are disposable, and that just needs to change if we're gonna continue to exist as a species, and not just people not being disposable, but everything. Right? The idea is the environment is disposable because it's resources that we can use for things. And yeah, we need to find a space in our heart to be able to care for the things that we've been told don't matter, and for the people who we've been told don't matter.
And the funny thing is, all the decisions change, the policies change, everything changes if you see people as human beings,
Mm-hmm.
if you feel compassion for them, because you don't make, massive cuts to welfare, and you don't, put people through difficult experiences if you empathize with them, and if you understand, and if you care about them. And that's what needs to drive policy making, and I say that as a policymaker in government. Compassion is what needs to drive that, rather than a kind of a hard-headed view of, again, we've just got to get the job done. You've got to see people as human beings, and it sounds like a very basic thing, but we don't always do that.
Yeah.
That's a good last word.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. I was going to say we're.
That's the best last word.
Yeah. All right. Before I do our goodbye song, can you both just tell people where they can find your work? Michael, you're at munchmisha.com. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
You're right.
I don't speak German or Croatian. I don't know which
You
one
did
it is.
great.
Great.
And if you Google Mindfulness for Beginners podcast, you'll find my podcast.
Yeah, I'll put links for both in the description. All right, we got a little song. Well, thank you, friends, Shaun and Michael, for your visit today. Now it's time we all go on our way. The world will still be insane tomorrow, but don't let that fill your heart with sorrow. You can thrive in a desert, just ask a saguaro. Please give to my Patreon. Capitalism is fun. Let's build a world that is good. This is a show for adults. Yeah, I flubbed the guitar there a bit, or ukulele.
Great.
Thank you both so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I love you both very much, and I'm really grateful for you.
Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Shaun. It's been an awesome time, very inspiring. And coming together and talking like this is just beautiful, and I hope those who watch it can also benefit from it.
I'm sure they will.
I really enjoyed the conversation too. It was fantastic to meet you, Michael, and yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. I'll let you know next time I'm in Europe. I don't know when that'll be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your night and have a great weekend.
All right.
You.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.